Powered by Riverside FM.
Well, I'm sure you all have heard the news by now that J.J. McCarthy will be out 2 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain, and Carson Wentz will be taking over. I've been trying to rack my brain on how I was going to come at this, and I think the first thing that I want to say is that we should be thankful that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, KOC, whoever it was, made a decision to move on from Sam Howell to bring in a quarterback the caliber of Carson Wentz, not knowing that this was going to happen to J.J. McCarthy, but this is a great insurance policy for the Minnesota Vikings. I would rather have Carson Wentz starting for the next 2 to 4 weeks rather than Sam Howell. That's first and foremost. The next question is, how long will J.J. McCarthy actually be out, and when will he be able to come back and take over the reins? I know a lot of people are depressed right now. I've seen a lot of content creators. I've talked to a lot of people. I've seen a lot of, news broadcasts when it comes to the NFL and the Minnesota Vikings. I've just heard a wide variety of things concerning this issue with the Minnesota Vikings, from J.J. McCarthy being a bust, not playing very well, that there's been speculation that this may be a soft benching from Kevin O'Connell, or this could be a legitimate injury where J.J. McCarthy is going to be out for a while. Here's my take on the whole situation. I think we have been, including myself, we have been touting J.J. McCarthy as the guy. And we've said this with a full chest and 10 toes firm on the ground, that J.J. McCarthy is the guy. Now, these just can't be words. Like, when you make takes like this, you have to believe in it. So for me, nothing has changed other than J.J. McCarthy having an injury. I was on board, just to clarify where I was with J.J. McCarthy, I was on board saying that this is going to be a better long-term move for the Vikings, making J.J. McCarthy their quarterback, more so than a short-term fix for the Minnesota Vikings, making J.J. McCarthy their quarterback. Quarterbacking in the NFL is extremely hard, and you can see how hard it was for J.J. McCarthy. In the 8 quarters that he's played, he's really only played 1 good quarter, 7 quarters not being so great. And so that's the body of work. That's the recent visual work that you see with J.J. McCarthy. And it kind of, when you look at the whole body of the whole thing, the 8 quarters, it kind of leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth. So there's going to be those people out there that are going to make quick decisions on J.J. McCarthy on whether or not he's a bust or not. There's going to be realistic fans who are going to look at the 8 quarters and say, okay, this is going to be a process. He's going to get better and better and better. There are a lot of impatient fans out there that wanted J.J. McCarthy to come out and look like Pat Mahomes the first couple of games of the season, and that is not going to happen. My take on this is this. This is not saying that Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than J.J. McCarthy. I am still on board with J.J. McCarthy being our franchise quarterback from years to come. But when Carson Wentz takes this thing over, this is my take. When Carson Wentz takes this thing over on Sunday, here's what you're going to notice, UP Nation, Skull Nation, Purple Gang. It is going to look better instantly under Carson Wentz than it was J.J. McCarthy. And this is not saying that Carson Wentz is a better quarterback. This is not saying that Carson Wentz should be our franchise guy going forward. The only reason why I'm saying that is because a lot of people like to twist things. So keep in mind what I'm saying. All that I'm saying is going to look different. And it's not necessarily about talent, but here's what you're going to get. Experience trumps talent in the early stages of development for quarterbacks. So here's where we're going to be better. Carson Wentz is going to be able to go up to the line, and he is going to be able to recognize defenses instantly. He's going to know the looks. He's going to know what defenses are trying to do. Why? Because that experience is valuable in the NFL. He is going to be able to decipher right away things that J.J. McCarthy just couldn't, because he doesn't have enough games under his belt. That's one area where it's going to be better. When you have an idea of what the defense is doing, it makes your reads quicker. He is going to be able to audible at the line of scrimmage. Keep in mind, he's been in this offense before when he was with the Rams under Sean McVay. So the verbiage is pretty much the same. All the sets are pretty much the same. The personnel usage is going to be pretty much the same. So he's going to be able to audible into things that J.J. McCarthy couldn't, which means the ball is going to leave his hands a little bit quicker. This is the area where I think is going to benefit the Vikings the most and where this thing is going to look different. Carson Wentz, bigger quarterback, stronger of an arm quarterback. I would challenge you to go back and watch highlights of Carson Wentz in the last couple of years he's been in the league. He is a big quarterback. He's a long arm quarterback, quick release, can fire the ball in there. In my opinion, Carson Wentz is of the level of a guy like Kirk Cousins where he's going to give you great stats. I believe he's going to throw for over 200 yards on Sunday. And he's probably going to throw for a couple touchdowns on Sunday. And this is because he understands the offense. He's not going up against a great defense in the Cincinnati Bengals, and he knows where to go with the football with a pretty talented group out there for Carson Wentz. Probably one of the best situations that he has ever stepped into. So his abilities, his arm strength to be able to get the ball where it needs to go is going to be paramount. And keep in mind, as big as Carson Wentz is, go back and watch the film. He is a pretty mobile guy. He can run. So there are going to be RPOs that he can run in Kevin O'Connell's offense that calls for a run, and he's going to be able to do that. Think about the Atlanta Falcons game, those 4th and 1s, those 3rd and inches where we were trying those quarterback sneaks. J.J. McCarthy is not that big of a quarterback, definitely not as big as Carson Wentz. So now those plays come into play as well. And this is why I think this thing is going to look better short term. And this is where it's going to be tough for some people and some fans after the fact when J.J. McCarthy becomes healthy to figure out what to do next. Because if you look at the next couple games, you got the Cincinnati Bengals, that's a winnable game. You got the Cleveland Browns, that's a winnable game. You got the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's a winnable game. So you're looking at Carson Wentz. This thing could be a 3-0 type streak for Carson Wentz. And then you have the bye week, and then you have the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you do during the bye week? What do you do after the bye week? If Carson Wentz is playing well and J.J. McCarthy is healthy, and we've gone 3-0, which I believe is probably going to happen, what do you do if you're the Minnesota Vikings? For me, we trust our instincts in this situation. For me, it's all about the optics and what it looks like. And it really has nothing to do with record. If Carson Wentz is looking mediocre and the Minnesota Vikings are winning games, I think you go back to J.J. McCarthy. I think the only way you don't go back to J.J. McCarthy is if Carson Wentz is lighting it up for 300 and throwing for 3 to 4 touchdowns. I think that's the only way you keep Carson Wentz in there. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of guts to stick with the plan. The plan has been J.J. McCarthy. You said no to Aaron Rodgers. You basically said no to Daniel Jones. You didn't want Joe Flacco. All the options that you had to bring in a veteran quarterback, every step of the way you said no, 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 because J.J. McCarthy was your guy. J.J. McCarthy was your guy for a reason. And if we're going to come on these YouTube channels and we're going to talk as fans and with a full chest and come out and say J.J. McCarthy is our guy before the season started, you've got to live with the good and you've got to live with the bad. Now, I know it's going to be hard to go back to J.J. if Carson Wentz is winning games when we had 7 quarters of bad football, 1 quarter of good football. It's going to be hard to turn around and flip the script and say, hey, we're going back to J.J. McCarthy. But these are the type of decisions that make or break franchises. Because what's your end game with Carson Wentz? What if Carson Wentz has a season just like Sam Darnold did last year? What are you going to do? You're going to get in bed with Carson Wentz, pay him a salary to stay with the Minnesota Vikings, or are you going to go back with J.J. McCarthy? The end game is trying to win a Super Bowl. Does Carson Wentz give you that this year? So if you put J.J. McCarthy on the shelf just because Carson Wentz wins 3 games, and again, I think the only reason you stay with Carson Wentz is if he's just lighting it up. But if it's all about winning, you stay with Carson Wentz because he's won 3 games in a row, and you put J.J. McCarthy on the shelf, you're just setting yourself back another year with your franchise quarterback. I think the Minnesota Vikings, this is just my opinion, I think the Minnesota Vikings have to be disciplined in this scenario. Again, let me clarify. If Carson Wentz is lighting this thing up for 300-400 yards a game, throwing for 4 touchdowns, Jets is having about 8 catches for $110 every game, couple of touchdowns. Jordan Addison comes back, Thielen is getting involved, TJ Hawkinson is doing his thing, then I think you would be foolish to take Carson Wentz out of the lineup. See, it's all about the optics and all about how the Minnesota Vikings are winning. I do believe that there is space to entertain Carson Wentz not giving this job back. See, you got to look at this from Carson Wentz's perspective as well. This may be his last go around or his last shot to be a starting quarterback in this league. It's got to be his last shot to be a starting quarterback in this league. So the focus, and he knows that he's got a lot of tools to play with for the Minnesota Vikings, is one of the reasons why he came to the Minnesota Vikings, decided to sign with the Minnesota Vikings. You got Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones, Jets, and the boys. You've got a lot of tools to play with. I don't think he's being able to play with a franchise that's as talented as the Minnesota Vikings. So his preparation is going to be paramount. What he's going to be able to do on the field with those guys, he knows that he has to bring it if he wants to stay in this league for another 5 to 6 years and have an opportunity to start as a quarterback in the NFL. So Carson Wentz is going to be ready to go. He's not going to want to give this thing back to J.J. McCarthy, so he has to play well. I think the big thing about Carson Wentz that everybody has criticized is in those big moments, a.k.a. like a Kirk Cousins, a.k.a. like a Sam Darnold, he doesn't come through in those big moments. He becomes a turnover machine and makes bad decisions. But outside of that, he's been a pretty good and serviceable quarterback. So there is a place to entertain. Carson Wentz may not give this thing back to J.J. McCarthy, which puts J.J. on the shelf for at least a year, because I don't think there is a scenario where Carson Wentz is just going to take this thing over and he is the next Minnesota Viking franchise quarterback for the next 5 years. Like, that's the one scenario that I don't see. But if the Vikings are winning and it's mediocre play from Carson Wentz, I think you have to go back to J.J. McCarthy. I think it's unfortunate that J.J. McCarthy is injured again. I don't think it's a great situation for J.J. McCarthy to be in, because they brought in a Carson Wentz who has a lot of experience, one time considered an MVP of this league. With that caliber quarterback coming in to take over for you, I don't know how good that is for J.J. McCarthy short term in terms of getting back into this thing. Carson Wentz brings a lot of familiarity with Kevin O'Connell's offense. Again, knows the verbiage, been in the offense, played for the Rams, Sean McVay. So I think he's going to fit in seamlessly. There's a reason why Kevin O'Connell wanted him. When J.J. McCarthy this week was out having his child, you heard KOC in his presser talk about how great. I mean, he didn't use the word good or great. He said that Carson Wentz looked phenomenal in practice. That is, he could have just said Carson Wentz looked really good in practice. He said phenomenal. And I know that Carson Wentz's stature, his ability to throw the football, man, he can enamor you very quickly if you've ever watched Carson Wentz play. He can enamor you right away if you watch him throw the ball. I think this is going to impact Justin Jefferson, because I think you're going to see an instant connection and some of the things that Justin Jefferson can do and what Carson Wentz can provide to this football team. I thought that under J.J. McCarthy, and this is throwing no shade at Jets or J.J. McCarthy, but I think with J.J. McCarthy being the starting quarterback for 7 games this year, looking at the first 2 games, I said you probably should sit down and have a conversation with Jets and be like, "Hey, man, this is probably statistical wise going to be one of your worst years." Not saying that it's going to be a bad year, but when you look at the numbers that Justin Jefferson has put up in non-injury seasons, I mean, his stats are absolutely fantastic. You know, this was going to be one of those years where he's going to have to be a little bit patient. You saw it in the first couple of games with J.J. McCarthy that he's not going to have these exuberant numbers. He's not going to have these gaudy numbers really consistently throughout the year. Like, I just don't see that because you have a guy under center that is just learning the game. I think Carson Wentz can keep the Vikings afloat in the NFC race. I think the big thing is not necessarily all talent for Carson Wentz, but I think this is the right situation for him to come in because I think these are 3 winnable games from Carson Wentz with the talent that the Minnesota Vikings have. I think we can win all of these games. And so I think it's going to bode well for Carson Wentz to be able to come in and play well. I wanted to also talk about, there's a lot of people thinking that this was a soft benching for J.J. McCarthy. I really don't see that, only because I saw when he got injured during the game when they were taping his ankle up. I know how these high ankle sprains go. You can play on those things right away, but the next day, when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be a different story. Those things are going to swell up. Those things are going to tighten up. And you have to look at your availability for preparation throughout the week. Like if J.J. McCarthy has a high ankle sprain, he's definitely not practicing today, probably not practicing on Wednesday. So now you've missed 2 days of practice. He already missed 1 day of practice last week. There's got to be a situation where you have to have a guy in practice every day that's ready to go, and that's Carson Wentz. So it's about ramping him up to be ready to go on Sunday. I don't think this was a situation where they thought that J.J. McCarthy is playing bad, so we got to get him out of here. I do believe this, though, because I saw it in KOC's press. And I think KOC right now is not getting off the bandwagon of J.J. McCarthy. I think this coaching staff really supports him. I think the players really support him. But I do think that there is a level of thinking right now, I can see it on KOC's face, that he thought this would be a little bit better. And he thought that J.J. McCarthy would be a little bit more ready. Not saying that he isn't ready, but I think KOC thought he would be a little bit more ready to take the reins. I think there are things that he's missing. I think there are times where he can get rid of the ball. I think KOC has to adjust to what J.J. McCarthy is thinking and seeing and maybe get rid of those 6-7 drop pass plays. J.J. McCarthy has the ability to throw quick passes. Not everything has to be play action pass. And if you go back and look at the Atlanta Falcons game, there were a minimum number of plays where J.J. McCarthy threw the ball that wasn't play action pass. Like, he has the ability to do that. Not everything has to be a fake handoff for J.J. McCarthy. He has the ability to get rid of the ball. But I think KOC thought this thing would look a little bit better. Like, I think that's safe to say. And so now, looking at Carson Wentz coming in, I think my guy Purple Soda out there was like, man, I think this may be a blessing in disguise. And I don't fault fans for thinking that way. That doesn't mean you're off the bandwagon with J.J. McCarthy, but I think right now, at this time, we've got to be able to move the football, and we got to give ourselves the best chance to be consistent on the offensive end. And in 2 games, we just haven't seen that with the combination of KOC and J.J. McCarthy. Now, we will see if that changes on Sunday. The Minnesota Vikings have flourished in these situations where they bring in a veteran quarterback with KOC. Things tend to work out in the short term when you have that type of relationship. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Carson Wentz on Sunday. Man, I have to admit I am intrigued. But I'm telling you right now, when it comes to the time, and there will come a time where the Minnesota Vikings are going to have to make a decision on whether to go with Carson Wentz or whether to go with J.J. McCarthy for the rest of the season. And I think the only way you stay with Carson Wentz for the rest of the season is if these next 2 to 3 games, however many games he gets, if he is lights out, if he is putting up numbers and this offense is moving, especially when you inject a Jordan Addison back in there, man, I know they're going to take a lot of heat from this. I know the word bust is going to start to come up, but I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to be faced with having to keep Carson Wentz in there. Because a lot of people are talking about, if you bring J.J. McCarthy back, what game do you bring him back in? And I'm surprised at that. People are saying you don't want his first game back to be against the Philadelphia Eagles. You don't want his first game back to be against the Detroit Lions. Well, we've been touting J.J. McCarthy all summer long. Like, he should be ready to face these type teams. What are we afraid of? Like, you don't want him to come in and face these type teams and look bad. J.J. McCarthy has to start to cut his teeth. And if Carson Wentz is looking mediocre, this is J.J. McCarthy's team. We said no to Aaron Rodgers, remember? We said no to Daniel Jones, remember? We said no to a lot of these options quarterbacks that could come in and probably look a little bit better in the short term because of J.J. McCarthy. My opinion is, and the job should be, to stick with the plan unless there's an outlier in Carson Wentz. Like, that's kind of where I stand with this whole thing. So it's going to be interesting on Sunday. Thank God for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah bringing in a guy like Carson Wentz. We could be suiting up Sam Howell for this game. And if we had Sam Howell, I don't think we win this game against the Cincinnati Bengals. But I do think we got a good chance with Carson Wentz coming in here. For those, I'm not on board with the people that say Carson Wentz is garbage. Carson Wentz is not garbage. To me, he's the same as Kirk Cousins. He just doesn't come through in big moments. And right now with the Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, there are no big moments. There are no big games. This is where Carson Wentz seems to flourish. He doesn't come through in big games, a.k.a. like Kirk Cousins doesn't come through in big games. But I think he's good enough to win these next 3 games. And then we evaluate from there which direction we want to take. It is unfortunate for a guy like J.J. McCarthy. I was ready to ride with J.J. McCarthy for 17 games, good or bad, because I know it's going to benefit us in the long term. So I hope Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, KOC, and the boys keep that in mind when it comes. I would hate for J.J. McCarthy to be on the shelf for the whole year. It just really pushes everything back for another year. He essentially comes in next year with, again, really no games under his belt other than the last 2 games. So, he's almost a rookie physically all over again, albeit it'll be his 3rd year in the league. He still doesn't have a lot of experience. So our key is to get, whether it's good or bad, the key should be to get J.J. McCarthy as much experience as he possibly can get this year, unless you put yourself in a situation where you feel like you can make a playoff run. And if that's Carson Wentz, I'm going to support Carson Wentz. And I'm going to trust the decision that KOC and the boys make. Interesting situation for the Minnesota Vikings. I didn't see this coming at all. Carson Wentz takes over at quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Help us stay in the algorithm. Help me continue to pump out the content that I pump out to you. And as always, UP Nation, Purple Gang, Skull Nation, I will make sure to see you when I see you. Carson Wentz starting at quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday at noon. Skull.